It was obviously rigged. Anybody who watched it, talk to any of, don't believe me, talk to any of the family members. It was unbelievable what a just shit show this was.
Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast, and I will tell you, I can vouch that there is definitely one angry man. Mark Geragos represents the Menendez Brothers. They were both denied parole today. You, my friend, are clearly pissed off.
Today is one of the first times in our, I don't know how many episodes we've done, quite a few, where I really am angry, because this has got to be, I mean, I hate to call anything rigged. The best spin you can put on any of this is that, as I used to say about the DA's office, that the 90s were calling, they want their DA's office back. This is parole. The 90s have called, and they've already got the parole board back. You've done the research, Harvey. You tell me, so that it doesn't sound like somebody who's trying to spin anything. You tell me, did you find in Lyle's packet, which was voluminous, 36 years in custody, over 30 years at the prison, did you find any violence whatsoever?
No, and it really shocked me because I was surprised at what came out with Erik, and I thought, I wonder if Lyle is going to look the same. And to me, it was basically a bunch of cell phone violations.
And by the way, there was actually, if you go back and read some of the recounting from they had a reporter, James Quealy from the LA Times. Quealy was the pool reporter. And Quealy reported out that one of the commissioners during Lyle's actually likened cell phone activity to cell phone usage to gang activity, which has got to be the height of hypocrisy. And talking about how it threatens correctional officers. Let me explain something to you as to how hypocritical and how outrageous this is. First of all, they have tablets, they've got phones, and they pay for minutes. I have to pay for get GTL. The only person who doesn't profit or gets impacted financially by cell phone usage in the prisons is the for-profit suppliers, number one. Number two, how do you think these cell phones get into the prisons? Do you think drones come by and drop them in? Or do you think guards smuggle them in and sell them to the inmates? I mean,
Is that what happened with Erik and Lyle?
That's what happens with every cell phone in the prison system. They're all smuggled in by the correctional officers. What a joke this is. The idea that somehow this is threatening to them. The idea that a cell phone is going to be the reason that you're not going to, in this society, in this day and age of AI, where you're trying to talk about people coming out and having some kind of a transition. Mind you, the record is replete with Lyle, especially, that he would not fight back when he was attacked in prison. That was one of the reasons they segregated him. How unbelievably disingenuous it is. And by the way, let's go back to Erik's or his Thursday hearing the day before yesterday by a commissioner who came in there loaded for bear, who, by the way, is a former Kern County deputy DA, who is, to say the least, not a fan of George Gascon, who was the person who initiated the resentencing, who then comes out and starts talking about whether Erik committed a burglary and focused on burglaries before the killings of his parents, and then focuses on a tax scheme that he engaged in 14 years ago, and basically poo-poos anything, didn't ask a single question about reentry plans, didn't ask a single question about anything else except wanted to lecture him on cell phones. And then today you've got one, and the family members are confiding to me They said these commissioners were so outrageously misinformed, were so out to lunch, were so disorganized that it was appalling to them as lay people, and didn't even want to hear, these people didn't even want to hear from all of the victims' family. All they want to talk about is cell phone usage and how that shows a criminal mindset. It's beyond belief to me. These guys have been in there for I don't know how many years, and that this is where we come to. Like shame on me for believing that there was going to be any equity in any of this.
So when you say that to you it looked rigged, why? I mean, what was their motivation, do you think, in denying them parole if in fact you say they were good candidates for it? Why would it have been rigged?
It was kabuki theater. Oh, yeah. Well, sorry. Why do you think? Do you remember during the resentencing hearing, there was all kinds of shenanigans by the Board of Parole, all kinds of shenanigans, to the point where the judge during the resentencing hearing actually stood up on the bench and on the record said, this is just stupid because, and by the way, that was about as euphemistic as the judge could be, because the shenanigans that they were engaged in to try to insinuate themselves in the resentencing process were beyond the pale. And thank God we were in an actual courtroom where they didn't shut down the public from being able to see or hear.
We should back it up
on.
and we should explain to people. My understanding, I think what you're talking about is somehow the judge got the documents from the parole board suggesting that they were not free from committing violence if they got out, essentially.
They changed the risk assessment,
right,
and they were mix matching risk assessments for resentencing. It was blatant. Once again, it reminds me of Nathan Hochman. He's not that stupid. When Nate Hochman says it's imperfect it's self-defense that they were claiming, he's not that stupid. This is a smart man who assumes that people who are listening are stupid. And his deputies were doing the same thing. In fact, they were reading from his script in the hearings. And I understand now why the parole board was so adamant about keeping the public from seeing this. If the public saw the shenanigans that were happening during these hearings, there would be a revolution. Nobody would believe that this star chamber was happening in the U.S. in 2025. It was unbelievable what a just shit show this was. For these people to be conducting and to be so ill-prepared, so out to lunch. And I should have known. It's really my fault. This is on me. I knew back in May from the resentencing that this group was not ready for prime time, that they didn't know what they were doing. The left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. The Board of Paroles was a utter shit show of proportions that I've never seen, to the point where a Superior Court judge stood up on the bench and just said they're stupid.
So paint me more of a picture of
that isn't adamant enough. I'm not angry.
No.
I can't get you angry.
Oh,
By
no,
the way,
no.
Where was the press during all of this?
Well, they kept us out. They kept us out.
And whatever happened to the old days? Do you remember, Harvey?
Yeah. No, I know.
24 years ago, I tried Winona Ryder's case in Beverly Hills. Do you remember that? You were around.
It's how we met.
Exactly. Well, we met before that.
Well, but
you don't remember.
But we worked together.
Yes. Well, I will tell you, the Court of Appeal in that case used to reverse Judge Eldon Fox by fax. Do you remember that?
Yep.
He would say something's not coming in. I swear to God, the press would come in, they'd file something, it would get reversed.
Yep.
He'd get reversed by fax machine.
Yep.
From the Court of Appeal. Here, they do everything possible to cloak this kangaroo court in shrouded in secrecy, and then come out and, what about this? Do you know that one of the commissioners actually asked today why? I swear to God, you can't make this up. Was Lyle, the fact that Lyle bought a Porsche after the parents were killed and Erik brought a Jeep, show the difference in their personality characteristics? That was a legitimate question. Not what have you done? Not Lyle, why is it that when people were attacking you in prison, you didn't get violent? Why is it, Lyle, that we don't have a single violent incident in 30 years in these prison system? Why is it that you've done this great work with the Green Space program and mentorship, and there's all kinds of people who talk about what kind of great work you do? But no, I want to know, back then when you were a 21-year-old who had just killed your parents, why did you buy a Porsche and not a Jeep? That was a legit, serious question. That's why they didn't want this to be public, because if the public saw this, they would just be beyond themselves.
So, did they distinguish, again, because we weren't there, did they in any way treat Erik differently from Lyle? Because with Erik, look, and I'm not judging because I don't know all the facts because I haven't seen the file. But with Erik, there were things. There was some violence. There was some conduct during visiting hours. And I'm not saying it justifies denying parole.
He touched
his wife.
Visitor. Yeah, he touched his wife. God forbid.
No, I get it.
Well, how are we going to let him out into society? He touched his wife.
I know.
I mean, they used the cell phone. He touched his wife. Hold the presses. Let's keep him in prison at $95,000 a year for another 3 years.
Yeah, I mean,
this is insanity. It's literally insane. When you have an open court proceeding in which you can litigate facts, not nonsense, not 90s retread parole commissioners who were appointed by previous administrations who were scared to death that they were going to get labeled as anti-crime. Not that group of 90s Neanderthals. And by the way, did you see who issued a statement yesterday complimenting the clarity and the precision by the parole board? None other than Nathan Hochman, Neanderthal number one, 90s Neanderthal number one, praising the parole board. That in and of itself should be the kiss of death.
So you say they walked in with a predetermined conclusion, right?
Oh, yeah. The guy who did the hearing for Erik purposely took himself off of Lyle and somehow managed to get himself assigned to Erik, and he came out loaded for bear. I mean, explain that. And you can't do that in court. If you do that in a real court, where you're not hiding behind some shroud of secrecy, you have remedies for that. You can say, hey, wait a second, judge, why are you here? How did you get here? I didn't sign up for you. You're not the person who was supposed to be here. Why all of a sudden did you switch?
And therefore you're saying it was rigged.
I mean, it was obviously rigged. Anybody who watched it, don't believe me, talk to any of the family members. The only person who attended that hearing who didn't think it was rigged was the DA's office. And you want to know the truth? If you got them, and there was only one DA present at each hearing, so only two others. If you got them and injected them with truth serum, they would admit it was rigged too. They didn't know. They were just method actors in a preordained script. This was nonsense.
So
total nonsense.
Why?
But
why?
It doesn't. Why? I don't. It's
no. You gotta have. I mean, why?
No,
I'm not. Listen, I'm not arguing this with you. I'm really. I want to know because you were there. Why do you think?
I wasn't there.
Well, you were watching.
Yeah, I wasn't. I'm not going to say anything.
Why?
All I will tell you is
why
do you think? Why, Harvey? You tell me. Why would an ex-Kern County deputy DA for 17 years, who gets appointed by Jerry Brown, who was notorious for not letting anybody out, and then is re-upped after that. Why would that guy all of a sudden get reassigned to Erik's and come out loaded for bear, not here, didn't ask one single question about his reentry plans, didn't ask a single thing, not a thing about, or didn't know the record, didn't know accurately what was being talked about, was basically, it was if he had watched the outtakes from the documentary combined with he had read the DA's screed, and that was his record. When you asked, when your push came to shove on any of this stuff, when and if they ever release a video or an audio, I should say, you'll see exactly what I mean. But I'm going to ask you, I'm going to push it back on you. Why am I the only angry man? You've talked to these guys. You're a pretty good judge of character. You're a pretty good judge of authenticity. You tell me if you think these guys are a threat for even a minute.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have spent I've had several conversations with them, and I didn't see any of that. That's just the way I feel. And I'm trying to get at something with you, and what I'm wondering is, was the motivation for denying them parole without really listening to anything that they had done to better themselves, was the motivation that the killing was enough, that let them rot in prison? I mean, is that what underlies all of this?
It's obvious. They were reading from the DA script, which is not surprising because the parole board is filled. By the way, the guy, this will tell you all you need to know. The guy who ruled Erik was unsuitable, okay, that commissioner, guess who he just previously, coincidentally out of nowhere, assigned himself to Erik or got assigned to Erik. Guess who he previously ruled was suitable?
I'm going to guess Patricia Krenwinkel.
Worse.
Who? Sirhan?
Sirhan. Yeah. The guy, we're talking about this kind of judgment. Sirhan, suitable. Erik Menendez, unsuitable.
He's the guy that recommended parole for Sirhan?
You have a producer with you right now?
Yeah.
Tell him to look it up.
Look it up. Holy smokes, that guy. Because by the way, I was at the Ambassador Hotel the night Robert Kennedy was assassinated.
I remember you telling me.
So I have a history here. And he's the one that Sirhan, who did this was a political crime, somebody with passions about the Middle East, and God knows how he feels today. And he recommended parole for him and not.
I just did my AI. Robert Barton is the parole commissioner who was on the panel that recommended Sirhan for parole August 27th, 2021. Barton noted Sirhan had made progress and was considered a changed man.
But wait a minute. But you're right. I remember now. He denied that he shot Robert F. Kennedy.
Correct. He completely changed during the course. He's a changed man with a changed memory.
And the argument here was that Erik Menendez, because I know this from the notes, that Erik Menendez did not own up to the crime.
Yeah, even though he has said every way, shape, or possible, admitted every detail to it, testified not in one trial, but 2 trials, and in the parole hearing, and every single one of his family members has testified not once, but twice, because after all, the DA's office, who is charged with representing victims, doesn't want to represent the victims here, but wants to vindicate some hypothetical theory of justice that they have never been able to articulate, except that Nathan Hochman wants to run for AG in 2026 and somehow thinks this is a politically expedient thing to do.
So how are they reacting to all of this? I mean, you talked to Erik, I'm assuming last night. I'm assuming you did. How's he reacting to this?
Look, how would you react to
not well
going in, preparing for months and months, for having freedom given to you in May, to getting a fair shot, to having a fair hearing, and then now have a DA who obviously co-opted the parole process, but when he was unsuccessful in trying to co-opt the court process? How would you feel? I'll just leave it at that. I know how I feel. That we're going to rename this episode "One Angry Man."
Well, no, believe me, I'm, you're in the middle of it, Mark. I'm kind of processing this idea that the same parole commissioner would recommend parole to a guy who denied he committed the crime that everybody knows he committed and he was convicted of committing, and Erik Menendez, who called it a generational crime, that it has affected generations of people in his family, and saying that something he will never forget or forgive himself for, that somehow you get the opposite results that you should. That's
And
shocking to me.
what are the
I agree.
odds?
I agree with you.
Yeah. What are the odds that the centerpiece of their argument, they being the DA's office, the centerpiece of their argument, don't believe me, go read it, was Sirhan. Don't believe me, go watch the press conference by Nathan Hochman, Sirhan. If we're playing a drinking game, and neither of us drink, but if we were, you would be drunk by the number of times that Nathan Hochman mentioned Sirhan. And lo and behold, the same commissioner who recommends Sirhan suitable finds Erik Menendez unsuitable.
So wait a minute. Why would now that you say that, why are you saying Nathan Hochman invoked Sirhan if Sirhan in many ways on the surface worked against Nathan Hochman? Because the argument would be back then when he did it a few months ago, hey, if the parole board's going to recommend parole for Sirhan, they're certainly going to recommend it for Erik and Lyle. So why would he invoke Sirhan's name? Because on the surface, it would seem to work against him.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're playing, this is all a political gamesmanship. That's all it is. I mean, if you play chess as opposed to checkers, it makes perfect sense. Who's the biggest dupe? Who's going to be the biggest dupe? Some guy who thinks that Sirhan is suitable? That guy, talk about going whichever way the wind blows.
So, unless I'm wrong, and I have a feeling we're aligned on this because we've talked about it a lot, Gavin Newsom wanted to grant clemency to Erik and Lyle. And I think he made that as clear as he could on his various podcasts, including the one with Ryan Murphy. And I don't see that there's any calculation where he would grant them clemency over this recommendation, even if he looks at it and says it's bogus, just because he's a political animal. He doesn't have the cover of the parole board now. Do you see any path?
I do, actually, because I'll tell you, if I was sitting there, put aside that I represent them, put aside that I know and have intimate firsthand knowledges to the system, put all of that aside. If I'm Gavin Newsom and I know that this guy was so diametrically opposed to reality to recommend Sirhan is suitable, then I've already got a track record. How can I believe anything that comes out of this guy's mouth? And therefore, I'm not going to believe that that his recommendation that Erik is unsuitable. I'm going to do the opposite. That's my calculation.
Right, but you're not running for president, and Gavin Newsom is. So
yeah, but you want to know something? I know that you take the TMZ polls, but you and I have discussed this. A TMZ poll is populated by it's not scientific. I don't want to trash anybody because we're presented by TMZ and LA Mag. But those polls are not scientific. If you were to just take the demographic, if you want to get political here, and the demographic of 16 or 17 to 29 and did a poll on this and presented them with the idea, the poll participants with the idea that a jury had heard evidence in a courtroom of the sexual abuse, and more than half of those jurors who heard the evidence said it mitigated the murder to manslaughter.
Yeah.
If you were to ask those people, I think you would find not the 80% TMZ unscientific poll. I think you would find 80% would say, what the hell, well, are you guys smoking something? Of course it should be manslaughter.
And I know you've looked at the poll, and I agree with you, we're not scientific, but a lot of times we really do align with Gallup and other polls. And I don't think it's necessarily 80-20, but I think it's look, Mark, let's get real. You know, and I know that the majority of people have a real problem with Kitty. And that's the buzzkill, that they can look at Jose and they can say, you know what, I kind of believe them, or I believe them, and it does mitigate. Kitty is the problem for a lot of people. And that's why when Gavin Newsom's looking at it, he's going to say, I don't have this cover anymore. I wanted to do it, but if I go against the parole board and know what the public feels and know about Kitty and know about this whole thing going on with Trump right now and crime, and I let them out, I'm going to get skewered.
Well, and all I'll say about Kitty is you can anybody, and I'm not saying you, but I run into that all the time. It's a first cousin of how do you know, how do you sleep at night if you know your client's guilty? And I always, my response is I sleep fine. It's when my client's innocent that I lose sleep. And what I say to Kitty, which is the next generations, is if Kitty's older sister, who was both her older sister and almost a matriarchal figure, if her older sister Joan is beseeching the governor, the DA, and the prosecutors and the parole board, if she's testifying, I want them out, I want them out, and my sister should have done more, then who are we and who is somebody else to sit and judge in that? There isn't anybody. As I often say to jurors, if you tell me that you have no issues, I've got issues, Harvey, you've got issues, everybody's got issues. If you tell me there is no family that has or that doesn't have any issues, then I call bullshit on that, number one. And number two, what I would tell you, it's their family to work it out. Their family, they've spent 36 years. These guys, when they had no hope, made the right choice, and their family is unified behind them. And if you believe that Marcy's Law in California is the Victims' Bill of Rights and not just a proxy for a prosecutor to do whatever the hell they want, which is what has happened here, because there is no right or person that they're vindicating. There is no interest that they're vindicating. If you believe that, then who are you to substitute your judgment for the unified 22 members of that family? Right?
Oh, fair enough. Fair. Do you think Gavin Newsom has the balls to do what you're saying?
You know what? A year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I was just discussing this with somebody on a different subject about Gavin. Did I think so? No. Do I think so now? I think this will be a great test. I think so. And so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I think so. I'm not relying on it. I'm going back to court because the only place that has not been, thank God for the courts. I mean, I'm a failed priest or priest wannabe. I'll go worship at the altar of the courts.
So what do you do in court now? You've already
We've got the habeas is live. So I'm hoping to get my evidentiary hearing on the habeas, and we also will have a habeas on the parole.
I don't understand that. I don't understand that. You can appeal the parole hearing?
Correct.
And what did they look at? Abuse of discretion?
Oh, there's all kinds of things that were. I mean, the two hearings were a template for the violation of due process. It's actually a throwback to people who do this work. It's a throwback to what was called the pre-Lawrence world, and Lawrence was a case, and this is a template for it. And they really, it's almost as if there's institutional amnesia because most of these people who conduct these hearings now exist in a post-Lawrence world. They don't understand the pre-Lawrence standards and the pre-Lawrence kind of protocol that you had to go through, and they've almost forgotten it. I've seen this in so many areas of the law where, for instance, I'll give you an example, Harvey. You know how sentencing guidelines at one point, you and I are old enough to remember, in the federal system, they used to be required, mandatory. You had to, a federal judge lost his discretion, had to do it. Then that was relaxed. Now they're advisory. You just have to basically do the calculation so that you get advice so that there's no disparity. Well, it's interesting to me that people who don't remember when they were mandatory will make some of the errors that people who remember when they were mandatory would not make. And the same thing is true in the parole context.
So if a judge were to set aside the parole decision based on some sort of abuse of discretion, wouldn't it just go back to the parole board?
Arguably, I think there's other avenues here. So I'm not going to reveal or I'm not going to give the DA any extra time to do their homework. I will just tell you it's not over by a long shot.
When does it go to Newsom?
Already there. I mean, arguably, there's a protocol they have to go through in terms of transmission and stuff, but it's less than 120 days.
So you're not giving up.
Oh, are you kidding? No, no, sorry.
That simple, huh?
Oh, it's that simple. Not only not just giving up. This is just they lit a fire. I mean, I had kind of gotten somewhat complacent, thinking that if you had any neurons firing, that this was a slam dunk.
You know, I will tell you, just closing here. I talked to Suge Knight today, and Suge is in the same facility as Erik and Lyle. And, you know, before the die was cast here, he was telling me the same thing. He said, it is a brutal place to be. And the idea that you could walk away without any violation after 3.5 decades is absurd. And if somebody gets in a fight, that's called normal. And, you know, the
It's
fact
exactly right.
right.
It's
And, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, you know, you can sit and in the comfort of your own home and you sleep in your own bed and go to your gym and go to a nice restaurant. You tell me if you place yourself, and then I know the trolls are going to say, well, they placed themselves there by what they did. I get that. I get that totally. But stop, at least be consistent. Once they're there, once they've been sentenced, once they've spent 35 years behind bars, 36 years since the incident 3 days ago was the anniversary, 36 years. And this idea that somehow you're going to talk about something that they did 38 years ago as informing your decision as to whether they're suitable now, I call bullshit.
You know, let's leave it at that. Mark, I got to say, I'm with you on the cell phone thing, and I didn't hear anything that was so, you know, alarming that they have done in those 35 years that you would say, oh my God, they're going to go out and do this thing again. Again,
Can I end on
the
one
cell
example?
phone things? Yeah, please.
The guy Barton yesterday talked about the fact that Erik had used heroin while in prison as disqualifying more than 20 years ago. Guess who else readily and proudly admits that he used heroin and is now serving in the cabinet?
Oh, that's right.
Guess, and coincidentally, whose father was assassinated by Sirhan Sirhan.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah, let's leave it at that. Hypocrisy writ large.
Wow. Okay, Mark, we know you're going to keep up the fight.
Thanks, Harvey. See you next week.
Okay.